I was never supposed to be here. My place was in Washington. Committee rooms, press conferences, cocktail parties where lies flowed smoother than the wine. I was a politician, a 50-year-old congressman with thinning hair and a carefully manufactured smile. My battles were fought with words, not weapons. And yet, late one November evening, I found myself flown to a desert no map dared mark, escorted by men whose uniforms bore no insignia. We drove for hours across black sand under a moonless sky, until the earth itself opened to swallow us whole. The facility was buried miles beneath the surface, a labyrinth of steel and silence. They called it Prometheus. I wasn't told why, only that I was there as an observer, a representative of civilian oversight. A phrase that sounded noble enough, but I knew the truth: they didn't want oversight. They wanted complicity. As the elevator carried me down into the dark, I caught my reflection in the polished steel doors. I looked like a man descending into his own grave. The deeper we went, the colder the air became. It wasn't just temperature, it was atmosphere, heavy and unnatural, pressing against my chest. By the time we reached the lowest levels, I could feel the hum through my bones. Machinery, maybe? Or something older. Dr. Elias Avery was waiting for me. Tall, gaunt, his eyes burned with a feverish intensity that unsettled me immediately. He shook my hand as though he were greeting an equal, perhaps even a co-conspirator. "Welcome, Congressman," he said. His voice was soft, but there was a weight to it. "You're about to witness history." I wanted to ask what kind of history required armed guards at every corner and doors thicker than bank vaults. But the words died in my throat when I saw the first chamber. Glass tanks lined the walls, filled with a pale fluid that shimmered faintly in the fluorescent light. Inside floated shapes. Not human, not animal, something between. Limbs that bent the wrong way. Eyes that opened when they should have been closed. Skin like translucent frost. I tried to step back, but Avery's hand rested on my shoulder, steadying me. "Do not be afraid," he whispered. "They're not monsters. They're messengers." My stomach churned. I wanted to leave, to demand the elevator take me back up into clean air and open sky. But instead I stayed. I listened. Because part of me, the part that had survived decades of politics, recognized the truth in Avery's tone. Something had been discovered here, something vast and impossible. And it wasn't just science. It was power. Power that could unmake the world. And now I was part of it. I don't know how much time I have left. Perhaps a few hours. Perhaps days. But I am certain of one thing. By the time you are reading this, I am either dead, or worse, silenced in ways you cannot imagine. My name is not important anymore. Once, I was a man of politics, a 50-year-old careerist who thought he had seen everything Washington had to offer. I sat in sealed committee rooms where decisions were made that shaped millions of lives. I used to believe I understood how the world worked. I used to believe in thick reports stamped top secret that we, the so-called guardians of democracy, passed around like gospel. But those files were nothing. Just smoke. A facade. There are things even those at the top should never see. And yet I saw them. I was invited, no, dragged, into a project called Prometheus. When I first heard the name, I thought it was some defense initiative. A new missile system, perhaps, or a weaponized satellite program. Nothing unusual for a nation obsessed with its enemies. I thought I knew what I was signing. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was stepping into Nevada. The plane that carried me there touched down in the middle of nowhere, on a stretch of desert too barren to even host a cactus. From there, a convoy of black SUVs whisked me to a steel gate carved into the desert floor. It yawned open like the mouth of some ancient beast, swallowing us whole. The descent felt endless. Tunnels bored deep into the earth, reinforced with steel and concrete, humming with electricity. And then, suddenly, a city underground. Fluorescent lights flickered above long corridors lined with doors marked only by numbers. The air smelled metallic, sterile, heavy with disinfectants and something else I couldn't quite place. Something organic. The people I met there didn't look like scientists. Their eyes were sunken, haunted. They didn't smile, not really. They barely spoke. It was as if they had seen something that eroded the very concept of joy. My role, they told me, was not to understand. I was there as a political overseer, to ensure accountability, to assure Washington that everything was under control. In other words, to be a witness. But nothing could have prepared me for what I was asked to witness. That first night, they led me into a vast chamber, cold and humming with machinery. Giant tanks lined the walls, each one filled with murky fluid. I thought at first I was looking at medical specimens. Failed cloning experiments, perhaps. But then I saw the eyes. Dozens of them, blinking slowly in the green haze. Not human. Not animal. Something in between. Shapes that suggested the fragility of unborn children, fused with grotesque anatomy that belonged in the deepest trenches of the ocean. One of them looked straight at me. I staggered back, bow rising in my throat. "What the hell is this?" I demanded. A man in a lab coat stood beside me, his expression unreadable. His badge read Dr. Avery. He gave me a smile that wasn't a smile at all. "You think we're just building weapons, Congressman? Prometheus is humanity's greatest leap. We're not destroying life. We're redefining it." I shook my head. "Where did you get them? What are they?" He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a whisper that chilled me to my marrow. "We didn't find them. We called them." I couldn't sleep that first night. The images of those things in the tanks, eyes unblinking, bodies suspended in green liquid, were etched into my mind like scars. I lay on the cot in the guest quarters they had assigned me, listening to the constant hum of the underground facility, the low vibration of machines that seemed to never stop breathing. Every corridor, every steel door here whispered secrets I wasn't supposed to know. And yet I was now tethered to them. The following morning, Dr. Avery handed me a badge with a new clearance level. "For your eyes only," he said, almost mockingly. "Consider yourself lucky. Few outside our inner circle ever get this far." He led me deeper into the compound, past 2 biometric checkpoints, and a set of blast doors thicker than anything I'd seen even in military bunkers. Inside was a vast chamber, unlike the sterile laboratories I'd walked through the day before. This place was different. The walls were covered with screens showing constellations, pulsating lights, and streams of incomprehensible code. At the center stood a machine unlike any I had ever seen, a massive ring of metal, etched with symbols I didn't recognize. It hummed with an energy that made the hair on my arms stand on end. "This," Avery said with reverence, "is the beacon." I swallowed hard. "And what does the beacon do?" "It listens," he said, his voice soft, almost hypnotic. "And sometimes it answers." He turned to me, his eyes gleaming with something between madness and pride. "You asked yesterday where we got them. We didn't create those organisms. We didn't find them in some ocean trench or dig them from the ice. We reached out, and something out there reached back." My mouth went dry. "You mean?" "Yes," Avery interrupted. "Extraterrestrial. Not visitors. Not invaders. Respondents." I felt my knees weaken. My political career had prepared me for corruption, for power plays, even for covert wars. But not this. not the notion that we had cracked open the void and beckoned something through. He walked me closer to the ring. I could feel its vibration in my bones, like standing next to a colossal heart. The beacon sends signals into the dark, patterns based on universal constants. Prime numbers. Hydrogen resonance frequencies. Basic truths no civilization advanced enough to survive would fail to understand. And months ago, we received something back. What exactly? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Instructions, he said simply. I frowned. Instructions for what? He gestured toward the tanks we had seen the night before. For them. That evening, I was given a chance to observe one of the live tests. They brought me into another chamber, smaller but more unsettling. Behind reinforced glass, one of the creatures floated in a tank, larger than the others. Its skin shimmered faintly under the fluorescent light, a pale gray that seemed to shift color when I blinked. This is Subject 7, Avery said. Our most stable construct. The word construct made me shiver. A young scientist in the room began typing commands into a console. The lights above dimmed, and suddenly, the fluid in the tank bubbled violently. The creature's eyes opened wide, and for the first time, it moved, deliberately. Its long fingers brushed against the glass, leaving trails of frost where it touched. Then, without sound, I heard it. A voice inside my head. You are not ready. I stumbled back, clutching my skull. What the hell was that? I gasped. Avery didn't even flinch. They don't speak in ways we understand. They project. You just received your first transmission. Congratulations. I stared at him in disbelief. And you think this is safe? You think this is progress? He smiled faintly. Safe? No. But Prometheus was never about safety. It's about fire. And fire always burns. Later, in the mess hall, I overheard two scientists whispering. They didn't see me step in. Subject 4 didn't last the night, one muttered. It broke containment again. Again? The other replied, glancing nervously around. How many times can we keep covering this up? Those things, they're not ours to control. A silence hung between them. Then, almost in a whisper, sometimes I wonder if we're not the ones conducting the experiment. Maybe they are. Their words sent a chill down my spine. That night, back in my quarters, I couldn't shake the image of Subject 7's eyes. They weren't just watching. They were studying, calculating. And deep down, I knew the scientists were right. We hadn't called them. We had been summoned. For days I tried to keep my distance. I told myself I was only an observer, a political attachment meant to report to Washington. Yet the deeper I went into Prometheus, the more I realized there was no such thing as distance. Everyone here was tangled in the same web, whether they admitted it or not. By the fourth day, I was summoned, no pun intended, to attend what Avery called a demonstration. The chamber was unlike the others I'd seen, circular, with walls lined in thick alloy plating, as if designed to contain something catastrophic. In the center, Subject 7's tank stood drained of its green fluid. The creature was inside, bound by metallic restraints, its translucent skin pulsing faintly with veins of light. Dozens of scientists and guards surrounded the observation deck. Avery stood at the console, his expression feverish. Today, he announced, you will witness the first successful communication between human and respondent. The air in the room felt heavy, charged. I pressed my palms against the glass, trying to steady myself. Avery gestured to a young technician. Begin. The restraints glowed as currents of electricity surged into Subject 7's body. Its form convulsed, but not with pain, at least not in any way I recognized. Instead, it arched its head back, eyes flaring open, shining like two white stars. Then it happened. Every screen in the chamber flickered at once. Symbols appeared, circles, lines, strange fractal shapes. The speakers crackled, not with sound but with something deeper, like a vibration crawling directly into my bones. And then, the voice. Not in English. Not in any language. But clear nonetheless. A whisper directly in my skull, layered, echoing, as though thousands were speaking at once. You open the gate. I staggered backward, clutching the rail. What did it just say? I shouted. Avery's face lit with something close to religious awe. It acknowledges us. It knows why we called it. The creature's lips didn't move, but the voice grew stronger. You seek fire. We offer flame. The scientists erupted into applause, as though history itself had just bent before their eyes. But all I felt was terror. Because as those words echoed in my mind, I glimpsed something, like a flash, a shadow cast across my consciousness. A place beyond stars. Shapes moving in a darkness older than time. And in that instant I knew, these things were not here to help. They were testing the lock. Afterward, in the corridors, I confronted Avery. Do you even hear yourself? You're playing with forces you can't begin to understand. He turned, calm as ever, his eyes burning. Congressman, humanity has always risen by daring the impossible. Fire was dangerous once, too. So was electricity. So was the atom. This isn't fire, I snapped. It's a damn abyss staring back at us. His lips curled into that infuriating half-smile. Perhaps. But the abyss is answering. That night, alarms shattered the stillness. I bolted upright from my cot, heart hammering. Red lights pulsed through the corridors as soldiers sprinted past my door, rifles in hand. What's happening? I shouted. No one stopped to answer. I ran after them, my badge bouncing against my chest. The air smelled acrid, tinged with smoke. Somewhere far below, I heard the unmistakable sound of metal tearing. By the time I reached the observation deck, chaos had erupted. The chamber holding Subject 7 was in ruin. One of the walls was bent outward, as if something had pushed from inside with impossible force. Sparks rained from shattered panels. And Subject 7 was gone. In its place, a scientist lay crumpled on the floor, his face pale, eyes wide open, frozen. His skin was rimed with frost, veins blackened as though something had sucked the life out of him in an instant. A soldier leaned over him, trembling. He just touched it, the man whispered. It looked at him and... He couldn't finish. Avery stormed in moments later, his lab coat torn, a streak of blood across his cheek. Yet even then, he wasn't afraid. He was exhilarated. This is it, he breathed. The breakthrough. Breakthrough? I roared. You've lost containment. That thing is loose. But Avery's eyes gleamed with obsession. Don't you understand? It's learning. Interacting. It's no longer bound to the tank, it's choosing. That means communication on a level we never dreamed possible. As soldiers sealed the chamber and began a frantic search, I caught sight of the glass wall where Subject 7 had pressed its hand earlier that day. Frost still lingered on the surface. And etched into it, as though burned by the cold, was a single word. Not written in symbols. Not projected into my head. But in English. The facility went into lockdown. Massive steel doors slammed shut, alarms wailed, and soldiers barked orders into radios that gave only static in return. The air turned thick with panic. I stood pressed against the corridor wall as squads in full tactical gear swept past me. Their boots pounded against the metal floor in perfect rhythm, rifles raised, eyes wide behind visors. They were trained for war, but I could see it in their posture. They weren't ready for this. No one could be. Through the loudspeakers, a voice tried to sound control. Level 7 quarantine in effect. All personnel remain in designated zones. Do not attempt to override security barriers. Level 7. I didn't know what that meant, but from the look on the soldiers' faces, it was the kind of code you never wanted to hear. Dr. Avery appeared beside me, almost out of nowhere, brushing dust off his coat as if the chaos around us were a mere inconvenience. "This is necessary," he said, his tone maddeningly calm. "Necessary?" I snapped. "That thing killed one of your men. It broke out." His eyes glittered. "And in doing so, it has proven what I suspected all along. The restraints, the tanks, the artificial environments, none of it matters. It doesn't need our machines anymore. It's adapting. Becoming autonomous." I grabbed his arm. "Listen to yourself. You sound insane. You've unleashed something we can't contain." He pulled away, his face hardening. "Containment is an illusion. Evolution isn't meant to be contained." Before I could respond, a gunshot cracked down the hall. Then another. Screams followed, muffled but sharp, tearing through the sterile corridors. Soldiers came running back, one of them dragging another who convulsed violently, frost spreading across his armor like veins of ice. I caught a glimpse of the man's eyes, white, lifeless, as if frozen from within. "What the hell happened?" a commander shouted. The surviving soldier gasped. It moved through the wall. Just passed through. Like it wasn't even there. We opened fire but bullets didn't." He broke off, trembling. My stomach dropped. The creature wasn't bound by matter anymore. The commander swore and turned to his men. "Seal off Section C. Full incineration protocol." The soldiers sprinted off, leaving behind the dying man, whose body had already stopped moving. Hours blurred into a haze of chaos. I was shuffled from one sealed chamber to another, along with a handful of high-clearance personnel. Food rations were distributed. Doors sealed behind us with echoing thuds. Every so often, the walls shook with distant explosions. From the fragments of radio chatter, I pieced together the horror. Subject 7 was no longer alone. Other tanks had gone empty. The organisms, constructs, as Avery called them, had awakened. It wasn't just one breach. It was all of them. At one point, a terrified young scientist collapsed in front of us, babbling incoherently. "They're not separate. They're connected. They speak to each other. One learns, all learn." Two guards hauled him away before he could say more, but the words stuck like knives in my mind. Later, I confronted Avery again. "How many are loose?" He didn't answer immediately. He stared at the floor, almost reverently, as if listening to something only he could hear. Then he whispered, "Enough." "Enough for what?" I demanded. He finally met my eyes. "For them to decide whether we are worth keeping." The blood in my veins turned to ice. "You think this is a dialogue? Avery, they're killing us. Or testing us," he said calmly. "Do you punish ants for failing to understand the boot that crushes them? Or do you observe, adjust, and see which ones adapt? That's all we are to them, an experiment. And what an honor, Congressman, to be chosen." I wanted to hit him, to scream. Instead, I felt only a hollow dread. Because deep down, I knew he was right about one thing: they weren't just monsters. They were intellect. Something vast and ancient, pressing against the thin barrier of our world, watching to see what we would do. That night, though in the underground facility, night had no real meaning. I was moved again, this time with a smaller group of survivors. Soldiers, scientists, administrators. Fewer than 20 of us. The corridors we passed were silent now. Too silent. No gunfire. No alarms. Just the hum of the beacon deeper below. Then we saw it. A wall ahead was slick with frost, glowing faintly as if light seeped through cracks in the metal. As we drew closer, we realized it wasn't cracks at all. It was patterns, etched into the steel, symmetrical and alien. A soldier raised his rifle. "What the hell is this?" The frost pulsed, and suddenly, Words formed in English across the surface. "We are inside." The soldier fired without hesitation, bullets sparking against steel. But the words remained, glowing brighter. And in that moment, I understood the truth. Containment wasn't just broken. It had never existed. We were herded into the deepest chamber of the facility, what the soldiers called the sanctuary. It was nothing more than a bunker within a bunker, lined with steel and lead, supposedly impregnable. But everyone knew it was a coffin. There were maybe 15 of us left by then, a handful of scientists, a few soldiers, a medic, 2 administrators who hadn't stopped crying since the breach, Avery, and me. The air inside felt stale, recycled, oppressive. We waited. Hours blurred. No one spoke much. The soldiers whispered among themselves, but I could hear the cracks in their composure. These weren't just men at war. They were men cornered by something their weapons couldn't touch. At some point, the radios crackled back to life. A voice, distant, strained, almost robotic, filtered through. "Containment, compromised. Beacon compromised, evac." Static swallowed the rest. One of the soldiers hurled the radio against the wall. "God damn it! We're on our own." The silence that followed was worse than the alarms. Avery, of course, seemed untouched by despair. He sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, lips moving as though in prayer. I wanted to scream at him, but fear kept me quiet. Finally I asked, "Why are you so calm?" He opened his eyes slowly. "Because this is not an ending. It's a beginning." I shook my head. "You're delusional. You've unleashed hell on Earth." "No," he whispered, smiling faintly. "We've opened the door, and they have stepped through." Before I could argue, the walls began to hum. A low vibration, deep and resonant, as if the very metal was alive. Frost spread across the ceiling, the floor, crawling in intricate patterns that looked less like ice and more like language. The soldiers raised their rifles. "Stay back! Stay the hell back!" One of them barked, though there was nowhere to retreat. The frost pulsed with light, and then the words appeared again. Not carved, not projected, manifested. "We are not outside." The letters glowed, shifting, rearranging. "We are you." I felt the blood drain from my face. My chest tightened. Around me, others gasped, some sobbing openly. One scientist collapsed to her knees, whispering, "No, no!" A soldier opened fire, bullets ricocheting harmlessly. Another screamed and tried to run for the door, only to find it sealed tight, unyielding. And then, the lights died. In the darkness, I heard breathing that wasn't ours. A wet, cold exhale that crept along the walls. Shapes moved, shadows against shadows, shifting, folding, merging. I couldn't tell if they were bodies or illusions. One of the soldiers fired blindly, and in the muzzle flash I saw it. Not Subject 7. Not any single creature. Something bigger. Something wearing the memory of human form, but stretched, hollow, filled with a lightless void that stared back at us like an open grave. The bullets passed through it as though it were smoke. And then it reached out, not with hands, but with thought. I felt it in my skull, in my marrow. A voice, but not a voice. "The experiment continues." Screams filled the chamber. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head, desperate to block it out, but there was no escape. The words weren't sound. They were inside. "We are the fire you asked for. We burn what must end. We shape what must remain." I tried to shout, to deny it, but my voice broke in my throat. Around me, people convulsed, eyes wide, mouths open in silent agony. Avery, however, stood tall, arms outstretched, welcoming it like a prophet. His voice rose above the chaos. "Yes. Yes. Take us. Remake us." And then silence. When I woke, the bunker was empty. No bodies. No soldiers. No Avery. Just frost-covered walls, humming faintly with that same impossible resonance. I don't know how I survived. Maybe I wasn't chosen. Maybe I was spared. Or maybe this is part of their design, leaving me alive to carry the message. I wandered through the ruined facility for hours, maybe days. I found corridors frozen solid, machinery fused into alien patterns. The beacon was silent now, but its ring was warped, twisted into shapes that no longer obeyed physics. Finally, I found my way out. The desert night was waiting, cold and starless. The facility's entrance sealed behind me, as though it had never been. Now I sit here, writing this account. I don't know if I escaped, or if I'm still inside them. All I know is this: the world above is going on as if nothing happened. Washington will deny everything. They will bury Prometheus as they bury every secret. But the truth can't be buried. Not this time. Because when I close my eyes, I still hear them. We are not outside. We are you. And sometimes, when the air grows cold, when silence lingers too long, I feel them moving in the frost on my walls. Waiting.